Imagine stepping into a dark limestone cave, torchlight flickering against damp stone walls. The air is thick with silence except for the distant echo of dripping water. But then your eyes adjust and you notice something carved into the walls. Marks of fire, shattered bones, and strange scratches that don't look like they came from animals. What if this wasn't just a shelter? What if this was a hunting ground, not for beasts, but for humans themselves? The first step into a cave is always unsettling. The deeper you go, the more the world outside fades away, sunlight disappears, sounds vanish, and the air grows colder. To early humans, caves were not just shelters from storms or predators. They were symbols of safety, places where firelight pushed back the darkness. But for some, these caves became something far more sinister. Archaeologists have long been fascinated by what ancient caves hide. In sites across Europe and Asia, they've found evidence that forces us to reconsider what our ancestors were capable of. Inside these caves, bones have been unearthed, human bones, but not intact skeletons. Instead, they are fractured, scorched, and marked in ways that suggest deliberate action. Imagine this: a thigh bone split open, the marrow scraped clean, a skull with cut marks along its edges, as if carefully stripped of flesh. Burn patterns suggesting bones had been tossed into a fire. These aren't the random results of decay or accident. These are signs of butchery. But the question remains, why? Were these acts of desperation in times of famine, when survival demanded unthinkable choices? Or were they part of something darker, perhaps even ritualistic? Caves like El Sidrón in Spain and Gough's cave in England reveal unsettling details. At El Sidrón, scientists uncovered the remains of a Neanderthal family, bones broken apart and processed in a way eerily similar to how they treated animal prey. At Gough's cave, human skulls were reshaped into cups. Were these tools of survival or evidence of symbolic rituals that we can barely comprehend? These discoveries suggest that caves were not always places of refuge. Sometimes, they became hunting grounds. The walls that once offered protection may have echoed with screams, the flicker of firelight revealing acts too disturbing for us to easily accept. And yet the bones do not lie. They tell a story we're only beginning to piece together, a story where humans were not always the hunted, but sometimes the hunters of each other. If bones could speak, they would tell us a story written in scars, and archaeologists have learned how to read them. Under the microscope, ancient human remains reveal secrets that the naked eye might miss. Precise incisions left by stone blades, scratches that follow the contours of muscles, and fractures caused by deliberate strikes, not natural collapse. One of the clearest examples comes from Gough's cave in Somerset, England. Discovered in the 1980s, the site yielded human bones bearing the unmistakable signature of butchery. The marks were not random. They matched the same techniques early humans used to strip flesh from deer or horses. Even more chilling, some skulls were carefully modified, the tops sliced off, smoothed, and shaped into what scientists call skull cups. Were these used in ritual feasts, or in desperate meals where survival erased the line between human and prey? At El Sidrón in northern Spain, the evidence is equally grim. More than a dozen Neanderthals, men, women, and children, were discovered in a collapsed chamber. Their bones told a haunting tale, marrow cracked open for nutrients, muscles stripped clean, teeth marks hinting at human bites. The level of precision suggests this wasn't a chaotic act of violence. It was systematic, calculated. But why would humans or Neanderthals turn on their own kind? Some researchers point to famine. In the harsh climates of Ice Age Europe, food shortages could push groups into extreme measures. Others suggest darker motives. Ritualistic cannibalism, perhaps, where consuming the flesh of kin or enemy carried symbolic meaning, an attempt to absorb strength, spirit, or dominance. And then there's the most unsettling possibility of all, that some humans weren't just scavenging in desperation. They were hunting each other. The caves, with their narrow passages and choke points, may have offered the perfect terrain to trap prey. prey that thought and feared just like them. The evidence forces us to confront a difficult truth. For all our talk of progress, cooperation, and shared humanity, buried deep in our past are shadows we'd rather not see, moments when survival blurred into savagery, and the hunter and hunted wore the same skin. The bones alone cannot tell us intent, and this is where the debate among scientists grows fierce. Were these acts simply born of desperation, families starving in the depths of winter, forced to consume their dead in order to live another day? Or do they represent something far more unsettling, a ritualistic tradition, or even a natural extension of violence woven into human survival? Take Gough's cave again. The modification of skulls into drinking vessels doesn't seem like a last-minute act of desperation. It suggests a process, a pattern, one repeated with purpose. In some interpretations, the act may have been ceremonial, a way to honor the dead or to symbolically consume their essence. But others argue that it was less about ritual and more about dominance, a declaration of power where enemies were not just defeated, but ingested. Neanderthals, too, complicate the picture. At El Sidrón, isotopic analysis revealed that these individuals weren't outsiders ambushed by strangers. They were a family group. Could famine have forced one branch of kin to turn against another? Or was the entire family killed, their bodies harvested by a rival band? The answers remain buried in uncertainty. What makes these discoveries so haunting is that they blur the line between necessity and cruelty. Survival cannibalism is something we can rationalize, grim, but understandable in extreme conditions. Ritual cannibalism, however, points to a deeper, more symbolic meaning. It suggests that humans and our close relatives were capable of seeing one another not only as companions or rivals, but also as resources. And this brings us back to the caves themselves. To us, they are archaeological time capsules. To those who lived within them, they were theaters of survival, where fire cast long shadows, and where the boundary between safety and horror could vanish in a single night. If the bones are to be believed, the story carved into the cave walls is not just about endurance. It is about power, fear, and a truth as old as humanity itself. Sometimes, the most dangerous predator we face is each other. When we picture predators of the past, we think of saber-toothed cats, cave lions, or massive bears stalking the shadows. But what if the most efficient predator wasn't a beast at all? What if it was human, or something terrifyingly close to human? The evidence suggests that in certain times and places, humans became the top hunters of their own kind. This wasn't just survival in the face of famine, it was strategy. Caves, with their natural choke points and hidden alcoves, provided perfect hunting grounds. A small group could lure or corner rivals, overpower them, and transform them from competitors into resources. Some researchers argue this behavior was part of a brutal evolutionary arms race. In the Ice Age, food was scarce, territories were contested, and competition between groups could be deadly. To eliminate rivals and gain food at the same time was a ruthless but effective solution. A rival group wasn't just a threat, it was a source of calories, tools, and even genetic dominance if their territory was seized. And this wasn't limited to Europe. Across the globe, traces of human predation emerge. In South Africa's Clayses River caves, 120,000-year-old human bones show cut marks and breakage consistent with butchery. In France, the Moulagursi site reveals Neanderthal remains treated in ways indistinguishable from animal prey. Even as late as the 14th century, in places like the ancestral Puebloan settlements of the American Southwest, evidence suggests episodes of cannibalism under extreme stress. The pattern is chilling. Across continents, across species, and across millennia, humans and their close relatives seem to return again and again to the same dark solution. But this wasn't only about meat. This was about power. To dominate a rival by consuming them wasn't merely survival, it was psychological warfare. Imagine the terror such acts instilled. knowing that defeat didn't just mean death, but becoming food for those who conquered you. It forces us to ask, was this behavior an ugly outlier, or was it a shadow woven deep into the survival instincts of our species? The deeper archaeologists dig, the clearer the global pattern becomes. Evidence of human-on-human predation isn't confined to a single place or moment in time. It appears again and again, like echoes across prehistory. In France's Moulagursi cave, 2 Neanderthal adults and 2 children, dated to around 100,000 years ago, were found with bones cracked open and processed just like deer remains at the same site. The marks are identical: flesh stripped away, marrow extracted, skulls broken to reach the brain. This wasn't improvisation, it was methodical. In the Clayses River caves of South Africa, fragments of early Homo sapiens show the same story. Jawbones and skull pieces bear sharp cut marks from stone tools. The striking detail here: these weren't Neanderthals but fully modern humans. It suggests that cannibalism, whether survival-driven or ritualistic, wasn't an anomaly of primitive cousins. It was part of our story too. And then there's the New World. In the arid landscapes of the American Southwest, the ancestral pueblones left behind evidence that has sparked decades of debate. Bones with boiling marks, cut traces, and even coprolites, fossilized human feces, containing human protein, all point toward episodes of cannibalism. Some argue famine drove these acts. Others believe it was warfare, where victors terrorized their enemies through symbolic consumption. What stands out across all these sites is the precision. This wasn't clumsy desperation. The processing of human bodies followed the same routines used for hunting animals: skinning, roasting, marrow extraction. It implies knowledge passed down, learned, and perhaps repeated across generations. Yet the motives remain elusive. Was it simply starvation? Was it ritual, a belief that consuming flesh connected the living with the dead? Or was it a demonstration of dominance so complete that enemies were not only destroyed but devoured? Whatever the reason, the pattern is undeniable. From Europe to Africa to the Americas, humans left behind evidence that they were not only the prey of saber-tooths and lions, they were also predators of each other. Looking back on this unsettling trail of evidence, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Cannibalism wasn't an isolated act of madness. It was part of the human survival toolkit, reappearing across different continents, climates, and cultures. The motives may have shifted, from hunger to ritual, from necessity to intimidation, but the act itself kept surfacing, like a shadow following humanity through time. And it forces us to confront a disturbing question. What does this say about human nature? Were our ancestors simply victims of circumstance, pushed into extremes by the cruelty of nature? Or is there something deeper inside us, an instinct for dominance that sometimes took the darkest possible form? Even today, echoes of this past linger in folklore, myth, and legend. Stories of man-eaters, of ritual feasts, of predators wearing human faces are found in nearly every culture. Perhaps these tales weren't just warnings about monsters. Perhaps they were memories, distorted and carried forward from a time when the greatest danger we faced was each other. But here is the paradox. The same species capable of consuming its own kind also built cooperation, empathy, and community. Without sharing food, protecting one another, and forming bonds, humanity would never have survived the Ice Age or spread across the world. It seems we have always walked a razor's edge, between compassion and cruelty, between solidarity and savagery. The caves remind us of that balance. Their walls hold evidence of firelight, artwork, and families gathered for warmth. But they also hold scars of violence, bones split open, and the chilling reality that the line between refuge and hunting ground was sometimes frighteningly thin. In the end, the story carved into stone and bone is not just about the past, it's about us. Because if humanity could once turn on itself so completely, then perhaps the real lesson is not how different we are today, but how fragile the boundary is between who we think we are and who we once had to be. When we step into the caves of our ancestors, we're not just looking at stone walls and scattered bones, we're looking into a mirror. The evidence they left behind reminds us of a truth that is both haunting and humbling. Humans have always been capable of extraordinary kindness, but also unthinkable cruelty. The caves tell two stories at once. One is of survival, families huddled around fires, sharing food, protecting one another from the dangers outside. The other is darker, of violence, of hunger so deep it broke every taboo, of rituals where the line between life and death, between kin and prey, dissolved in the flicker of torchlight. It's easy to think of these acts as distant, buried in time, but they force us to ask hard questions about ourselves. What choices would we make if pushed to the edge of survival? Are compassion and morality luxuries of abundance, or have they always been stronger than our darker instincts? And perhaps that's why these stories still captivate us, because deep down we recognize the struggle. We know that the battle between light and shadow doesn't just exist in ancient caves, it exists within us. So the next time you hear the silence of a dark place, or see the flicker of fire against stone, remember, the caves are speaking. They're telling us not just where we came from, but what we're capable of becoming. If this journey into humanity's forgotten past made you think differently about who we are and what we carry from those who came before us, consider subscribing to the channel. Share your thoughts below. Do you think these acts were survival, ritual, or something darker? Because sometimes the scariest story isn't about monsters at all. It's about us.